This is a movement that we have to be aware of and confront.
During the 25th Annual Justice and Accountability Conference held at Vanier College in Montreal this past week, many of the speakers addressed a growing perception.
I think expressions of hate are on the rise simply because the technology for the dissemination of that hate, facilitates its dissemination.
Hate is on the rise, and all kind of hate.
People who study the sort of indexes of hate, of anti-Semitism, of racism, sexism, homophobia, are seeing increases around North America, Europe, and certainly in the Middle East.
It's the targeting of vulnerable minorities that worries me, because they are the least able to protect themselves. And when that targeting comes also from people who are in positions of authority, then it gives the targeting a sense of validation, and it makes the targets even more vulnerable.
Holocaust survivor Sidney Zoltak says places of worship and schools have been targeted with bomb threats and vandalism in Montreal, Toronto, and across the United States.
For me, as a Holocaust survivor, the swastika was a symbol that killed 6 million Jews and many more millions of others. And the symbol was always, the front runner was the swastika. So when I see the swastika, I am very angry, and also at the same time, I cannot understand why this is still being used.
If free speech means silencing the most vulnerable groups in society and allowing louder voices, voices of incitement, to speak unhindered, does that truly comport with our substantive democratic values?
At a conference that addressed genocide issues of both the past and present, law professor Karen Eltis from the University of Ottawa addressed hate speech in the digital world and its potentially violent impact in the real world.
So the importance of curtailing incitement, demonization as a very common characteristic of incitement, which in turn facilitates violence. We've seen it most recently in Rwanda and elsewhere, so dehumanizing victims who then become more prone to sustaining acts of violence.
Many speakers at Vanier used examples of genocide to address lessons aimed at preventing violence.
They're not only lessons to be learned in a historical sense, but the action to be taken in a preventive sense.
The universal lessons that are reiterated here at this conference, one of which is preventing incitement, the other is the importance of speaking out. Apathy is just as dangerous as hate speech. All that it takes for evil to prevail, as the adage says, is for good people to do nothing. So we need to maintain a robust democracy, speak out, and protect the vulnerable, prevent the vulnerable from being demonized.
My main message would be not to be a bystander when you see something that is wrong.
One phenomenon which this conference is also addressing is, and this is one of the universal lessons emerging from the Holocaust, but not only the Holocaust, but Rwanda, the genocide in Rwanda, is the danger of state-sanctioned incitement to hate and to genocide. In other words, the Holocaust and the genocides that followed in Rwanda, in Darfur, occurred not simply because of any machinery of death, but because of state-sanctioned incitement to hate and to genocide. It's this teaching of contempt, this demonizing of the other, this is where it all begins.
We know, my parents knew, my grandparents know, that when you acquiesce to this type of ideology and you acquiesce to anti-Semitism, it begins with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews.
Dr. Charles Usher Small says he hopes the messages of the conference will spread far beyond the walls of this college that hosts an anti-genocide symposium every year.
Learning how dehumanization is based on ideologies, learning about the ideologies, learning how ideologies can lead from small-scale forms of hatred to literally taking over the apparatus of power, as it did in Nazi Germany, and wreak havoc not just on the Jews, their intended target, by but on all of society. More than 80 million Europeans were murdered in the Second World War, and Europe was nearly, certainly devastated, if not destroyed. And we have to learn that these lessons are repeating now in front of our very eyes in real time in Syria.
We have to be vigilant. And we have to stop any kind of sign right from the beginning and not wait too long. Indifference is a contributor to genocide.